Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. For years, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the founder of ISIS, lived in fear of being caught. People close to him said he almost always had a suicide vest nearby, and sometimes even slept wearing one. He only traveled at night, wore disguises, and kept a very small group of loyal guards. They avoided using phones, so they could not be tracked. He often hid in the deserts of Syria and Iraq, crossing borders in secret by dressing up like a shepherd to avoid being recognized. However, by late 2019, his power was crumbling. Many of his closest men were dead, and intelligence just discovered he was hiding in northwest Syria. A raid was planned, but to reach the target, American units had to fly through airspace controlled by Russia and Turkey. This was one of the few instances where they all collaborated. In the night, helicopters carried U.S. Special Forces toward a small compound. They landed, and the assault began. Inside, Baghdadi tried to escape into a tunnel, but he had no way out. Military dogs chased him, and knowing he was trapped and seconds away from capture, he set off the suicide vest he was wearing. The blast killed him, and unfortunately, he had 2 children with him. Abu Nidal. Abu Nidal, one of the world's most feared Palestinian militants, had one of the most controversial deaths, shrouded in conspiracy theories and different accounts. He was living quietly in Baghdad in the summer of 2002, and his network had carried out assassinations, hijackings, and bombings across the Middle East and Europe. However, by then, his power collapsed, and he was basically just hiding under Saddam Hussein's protection. Then, in August 2002, Iraqi intelligence officers came to his apartment to take him in. What happened next is still disputed. The official Iraqi version said that when officers arrived, Abu Nidal asked for a moment to change his clothes. He then went into his bedroom, and a gunshot followed. They gave journalists photographs of the body and a medical report, which said that he died in a hospital after about 8 hours. However, other accounts quickly surfaced. A Palestinian newspaper reported that he had actually died from multiple gunshot wounds. Palestinian sources believed that in reality, Saddam Hussein had ordered his killing, not just a simple arrest. A magazine offered yet another version. According to its report, Iraqi intelligence raided Abu Nidal's home after discovering secret documents about a possible U.S. attack on Iraq. A fight then broke out between his men and the Iraqi officers, and in the chaos, Abu Nidal was killed. This might have been because Saddam wanted him eliminated before any American invasion, fearing he might turn against the regime. Years later, another report claimed that Iraqi officers had been questioning him in his home as a suspected spy for Kuwait and Egypt, and indirectly for the United States. According to this account, the Kuwaitis had asked him to look for links between Iraq and al-Qaeda. Ayman al-Zawahiri. For more than 2 decades, Ayman al-Zawahiri was one of the world's most wanted men. He was Osama bin Laden's deputy during the September 11 attacks and became leader of al-Qaeda after bin Laden's death in 2011. Several times reports claimed he had been killed in airstrikes in Pakistan or Afghanistan, but each time he reappeared in new videos, keeping the hunt alive. By early 2022, though, this stopped. U.S. intelligence discovered that Zawahiri had moved into a house in Kabul's Sherpur neighborhood, one of the richest parts of the city. Then, for months, American agencies kept track of his routines, and they noticed that he had the habit of stepping onto the balcony. The information went all the way to the White House, where President Joe Biden debated for weeks before giving final approval. The decision was especially delicate because being in a crowded city, the risk of civilian casualties was high. The weapon chosen was unusual, the R-9X Hellfire missile, nicknamed the Flying Ginsu. Unlike standard missiles, it does not explode. Instead, it kills by direct impact and by releasing sharp metal blades designed to slice through the target without destroying the building or killing bystanders. At sunrise on July 31, 2022, a CIA drone fired 2 of these missiles at the balcony, while Ayman al-Zawahiri, then 71 years old, was standing outside. The missiles struck with precision, killing him instantly, and no one else in the house was harmed. His death ended one of the longest manhunts in history, and the day after, President Biden addressed the nation saying, "Justice has been delivered. This terrorist leader is no more." For the United States, it was the biggest strike against al-Qaeda since bin Laden's death. Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. For years, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi was one of the most feared militants in the world. He was a Jordanian extremist, known for personally beheading hostages on video and organizing suicide bombings that destroyed markets, mosques, and even embassies. U.S. officials blamed him for thousands of deaths and put a $25 million reward on his head, making him one of the most wanted men alive. Even within al-Qaeda, some leaders grew tired of his obsession with killing Shia Muslims, saying it hurt their cause. The hunt for him stretched across months until a captured member of his network gave up clues to the Jordanian authorities. They passed along the information to the U.S., which kept a close watch on a safe house near Baquba in Iraq. When Zarqawi finally walked inside, the order was given to strike. 2 U.S. Air Force F-16 jets flew over the village and dropped 2 500-pound guided bombs on the building. The blasts tore the house apart, killing most people inside instantly, but Zarqawi did not die right away. When American and Iraqi troops searched the rubble, they found him alive, badly wounded but still conscious. Witnesses said he tried to move and even attempted to get off a stretcher before soldiers restrained him. Minutes later, though, he died. An autopsy showed a large chest wound and severe blast damage to his lungs. Doctors believed it may have taken him close to an hour to die, making it a pretty slow and painful end. That brief survival time sparked rumors. An Iraqi witness claimed U.S. soldiers beat him while he lay dying, but the American military denied this, saying medics were trying to save him. Anwar al-Awlaki. Born in the United States and later moving to Yemen, Anwar al-Awlaki became one of al-Qaeda's most powerful figures. What made him most dangerous was his fluent English and his grasp of the internet, which allowed him to reach Western audiences through propaganda in ways Osama bin Laden never could. He was linked to several major attacks, and by 2010, his name was officially placed on the CIA's kill list. It was a historic and controversial decision because it made him the first U.S. citizen ever approved for targeted killing. President Barack Obama personally authorized it, even as critics argued that killing an American without a trial was illegal. For years, they tried tracking him down until they eventually found him and sent a drone to kill him. He was in a car, and the drone opened fire, killing most people inside the car. However, al-Awlaki himself survived. They also tried eliminating him through air raids in Yemen, but he survived those too. Then, on the morning of September 30th, 2011, his luck ran out. Witnesses said that he and his group had stopped to eat breakfast, and not long after, a U.S. drone spotted their convoy. One of the cars tried to escape, but it was too late. Hellfire missiles slammed into the vehicle, killing al-Awlaki instantly. 2 weeks later, another U.S. drone strike killed his 16-year-old son, Abdulrahman, who had traveled to Yemen to look for his father. Velupillai Prabhakaran. Velupillai Prabhakaran, founder of the Tamil Tigers, also known as LTTE, had once controlled vast parts of northern Sri Lanka. For over 25 years, he waged war to create an independent Tamil homeland. And under his command, the Tigers pioneered the use of suicide bombers, assassinated prime ministers, and fought government forces in one of the longest insurgencies in Asia. By May 2009, though, the Sri Lankan army had cornered him and his last fighters on the banks of the Nandikadal Lagoon. Many were ordered to burn or destroy Prabhakaran's body if he died, to prevent it from being taken as a trophy by the enemy. At dawn on May 19th, Sri Lankan troops advanced through the mangroves. For 2 hours, they fought against Prabhakaran and roughly 30 of his bodyguards. By the end, every one of them was dead. Among them was a man wearing a dog tag marked 001. He carried 2 pistols, a rifle with a telescopic sight, a satellite phone, and medicine for diabetes. The colonel confirmed it was Velupillai Prabhakaran himself. His body was displayed on national television, and official reports said he had been struck by shrapnel during the battle. However, the exact cause of death soon became the subject of dispute. Some witnesses claimed he had been captured alive and executed at close range, pointing to a head wound visible on his corpse. Others said he had killed himself rather than surrender, keeping his promise that he would die in honor rather than be caught alive by the enemy. What happened to his family added even more controversy. Reports circulated that the bodies of his wife and daughter had been found near the battlefield, though the army denied this. His 12-year-old son, Balachandran, was photographed alive in custody, sitting in a bunker, but minutes later, he was dead. This fueled accusations of execution and war crimes. Abbas al-Musawi. By early 1992, Abbas al-Musawi was Hezbollah's Secretary General. He was linked to kidnappings and killings, including the abduction of U.S. Marine and UN officer William R. Higgins and the disappearance of Israeli soldiers. Originally, Israeli intelligence prepared a kidnapping plan, codenamed Nighttime. The idea was to capture al-Musawi and use him in a prisoner exchange. However, when the chosen day came, he was surrounded by a large crowd, making an abduction impossible. Israel's military intelligence chief then recommended switching to a strike. Ehud Barak, chief of staff at the time, pressed Defense Minister Moshe Aarons to approve it, saying Israel would not get another chance. Aarons hesitated, but finally gave the order, and missiles were cleared to fire. On the afternoon of February 16, 1992, al-Musawi was traveling in a 3-car convoy in southern Lebanon. He was with his wife, his 5-year-old son, and bodyguards. 2 Israeli Apache helicopters were waiting near the border, though the pilots had not been told exactly who the target was. When the cars came into view, the Apaches struck. Hellfire missiles hit the cars, completely obliterating them and leaving fire and wreckage across the road. A Hezbollah spokesman later said al-Musawi and his family were burned alive inside their car. Reports from the scene added that some people who tried to escape were cut down by automatic gunfire. At least 10 others in the convoy were wounded. Privately, some officers had warned that removing al-Musawi would not weaken Hezbollah, since the group was not built around one man. Their fears were that his replacement might be even more extreme. In response to al-Musawi's death, the Islamic Jihad organization bombed the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires, killing 29 civilians. 2 years later, the group also carried out the AMIA bombing in the same city, killing 85 more. Then, on some of the next anniversaries of al-Musawi's death, Hezbollah made ambushes against Israeli forces in southern Lebanon. Abdelmalek Droukdel. Abdelmalek Droukdel was one of al-Qaeda's oldest surviving commanders, and the one who built al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, also known as AQM, into a powerful regional branch. Under his leadership, AQM introduced suicide bombings to North Africa and ran a campaign of kidnappings for ransom that brought in tens of millions of dollars. His group bombed the Algerian Prime Minister's office in 2007, attacked hotels in Mali, and spread operations across Mauritania, Niger, Libya, and Tunisia. For years, he avoided capture. He hid in Algeria's mountains and survived repeated attempts on his life. But by the late 2010s, his influence had started to fade. AQM's stronghold in Algeria weakened. New ISIS-linked groups were rising, and many of the most active jihadist factions no longer answered to him. French special forces had been tracking him for months, and on June 3, 2020, they finally moved in. Droukdel and 5 other men were in a white SUV when they stopped by a cluster of rocks and set up a temporary campsite near a riverbed. French troops, supported by US intelligence, closed in on them. The jihadists at first tried to flee, scattering in different directions and taking cover among rocks, but then they attempted to counterattack, firing at the French forces. One by one, the AQIM fighters were killed, and then a bullet hit Droukdel himself, killing him. The SUV driver surrendered and was taken into custody. Carlos Castaño. Carlos Castaño Gil's problems began as a teenager, after guerrillas killed his father. Seeking revenge, he joined the fight and eventually became co-founder of the Autodefensas Unidas de Colombia, or AUC, Colombia's most powerful paramilitary organization. Under his command, the group carried out massacres, trafficked cocaine, and built ties with politicians. For years, he was one of the country's most feared commanders. By the early 2000s, though, he had become a problem for his own allies. He started speaking openly about the AUC's connections and drug trafficking business. In one interview on television, he admitted that 70% of the group's money came from cocaine. On the morning of April 16, 2004, in what seemed like a normal day, Castaño was suddenly gunned down. At first, the AUC claimed it had been an accident, a sudden shootout between his bodyguards and another armed unit. However, that story collapsed quickly, as reports from inside the organization said he had not died in crossfire at all. Instead, rival paramilitaries had captured him, tortured him, executed him, and secretly buried him. The orders, it was said, came from his own brother Vicente and from Diego Murillo, known as Don Berna, one of the AUC's top commanders. Investigators searched the area where he had disappeared and found a makeshift grave, but the body inside was not his. Rumors spread wildly, with some saying he had been flown out of Colombia or that he was living in Syria or Egypt. For 2 years, nobody knew for certain if he was dead, and conspiracy theories spread. The mystery ended more than 2 years later. Acting on information from Jesus Roldan, a former guerrilla who had joined the paramilitaries, authorities uncovered a shallow grave. Inside were bones that DNA tests confirmed belonged to Carlos Castaño. Witnesses said his body had been dismembered and partly burned before burial, which was an attempt to erase the evidence. Osama bin Laden. For nearly a decade after the September 11th attacks, Osama bin Laden was the world's most wanted man. To avoid detection, he kept his circle small, avoided phones and the internet, and hid with a local family in Abbottabad, Pakistan. His hiding place shocked the world when it was revealed. It was near Pakistan's main military academy. Keep in mind that officially, Pakistan was a US ally in the war on terror. President Barack Obama gave the green light for a mission to capture or kill him. The operation was codenamed Neptune Spear and was directed by the CIA, with US Navy SEAL Team 6 carrying out the assault. Just after 1 a.m. on May 2, 2011, helicopters carrying the SEALs lifted from Afghanistan and descended on bin Laden's compound. They stormed inside the 3-story house, moving quickly from room to room. On the upper floor, bin Laden was finally cornered. One SEAL later recalled that bin Laden leaned out of a bedroom doorway. A teammate fired 2 silenced rounds into the side of his head from about 10 feet away. When the SEALs rushed in, his body was still twitching, so 2 operators fired multiple shots into his chest chest to make sure he was dead. Another SEAL, Robert J. O'Neill, was later named in the press as the man who fired the fatal shots, though others disputed it, saying bin Laden may already have been dying before O'Neill fired. The SEALs gathered what they could and left the compound that same night. Early reports said his body was flown to Afghanistan for identification before being buried at sea within 24 hours. In 2012, Pakistan demolished the compound to prevent it from becoming a shrine. If you want to discuss this video or suggest an idea for the next one, join my Discord, link in the description.